Matthew chapter 5. This starts the only recorded sermon of Jesus. Now, there's lots of teachings, and we'll encounter quite a number of parables and discourses of shorter length. But the Sermon on the Mount, this discourse on the hillside, is the longest and probably constitutes the only sermon that Jesus preached that we have a record of. All right, so let's start verse 3. These are the Beatitudes. This was a term given to them by Bible students long after Jesus spoke the words. You'll notice that the word beatitude never appears anywhere in the actual text. But it's no big deal. It's just a little point of information. I think Beatitudes is still a valid term for what Jesus preaches here. These are the blesseds. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. As you back up a little bit, there are several various interpretations of what's the point. What point was Jesus making with these blesseds? Some, if you're very interested, you can pursue it. One that I found interesting is from an author that, to be honest with you, I loved hearing him speak, but I didn't so much love reading his books. But they're full of good stuff. Dallas Willard writes about his sense of what the Beatitudes are. My sense is that these are not, it's not like Jesus saying, hey, try to be poor in spirit. I think he's just kind of saying, these are fundamental truths. So, okay, that's how I'm going to approach it. Blessed or blessed, I grew up with the idea, the pronunciation of blessed rather than blessed. Another translation of that word is made happy, or happy are. Happy are the poor in spirit. What does it mean to be poor in spirit? Well, I think this is an attitude. Things of the spirit are things of attitude. And so to be poor in spirit, one way that I look at it is that, excuse me, I'm poor in voice today. To be poor in spirit basically means I understand my spiritual need. Like when I'm poor in money, I understand I don't have enough money. When I'm poor in health, I understand my health is not good. To be poor in spirit, I believe that the people Jesus is identifying here as the poor in spirit have humbled themselves to see themselves as they actually are. not as, there's no mask here between them and God. This is who I am, and I am poor in spirit. And it's almost like, here's what makes the poor in spirit happy. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Okay, I'm going to go down a little pathway here, but there's only one way to enter the kingdom of heaven, and that is through Christ by faith, and it's Christ's grace that puts us in the kingdom of heaven. His grace is the key there, I think. And okay, run it back a little further then. James and Peter both say, God gives grace to the humble, but he resists the proud. The humble receive God's grace. And I think briefly, there's an aspect of this, in my opinion, that makes tons of sense. Only humble people realize their need for God's grace. And I think that's at the root of the poor in spirit. When you're poor in spirit, you humbly evaluate your life and you realize you need God's grace. The humble enter into God's kingdom. He goes on in verse 4, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Mourn about what? Is this just general mourning? I've known some people who mourned legitimately. They had a legitimate loss, and the mourning was, I don't know how to say it, but it was sensible. I've also known people who mourned and never quit mourning, who never seemed to be comforted. Jesus says, blessed or happy are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Now, I don't want to take liberties with this, but I'll come back to that question. Who mourn what? Is this just the generalized mourning that everybody who mourns will be comforted? I don't know. Actually, I don't see that happening. So I can say, I don't think that's it. What about people who mourn their sin, who mourn their bad choices, who mourning our sin is the starting point for experiencing God's comfort. We start with mourning, but that's not the whole thing. What mourning our sin is supposed to lead to repentance. And when you mourn your sin, you will find comfort because God, he honors. Again, you don't mourn your sin if you're not humble. Only the humble will mourn their sinful behaviors, their sinful attitudes. Now, that's me. And a lot of times I don't mourn those things. I get frustrated by them more often than I would like. I try to pass the blame off for them on other people and circumstances beyond my control and whatever. But you know what? Until I own it, Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And then he goes on in verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now that to me seems quite upside down. What does meek mean? A lot of times, meek is equal to mousy, right? It's equal to the husband or wife who just shrinks and shrugs and goes on and does what they're told. That's not meekness. I don't even think that's submission. Meek, the Greek word that is used here for meek, actually was also used for a trained war horse. A horse that had been broken and trained so that they also became a weapon in battle. A simple summarizing phrase is strength under control. See, you didn't want a skittish horse if you were a cavalry rider. You wanted a fiery. You probably wanted the maverick. You wanted this. That they were hard to break. That's the one you wanted. You didn't want this one that would give in, and that that doesn't work well in battle. A war horse was strong, but controlled. Strength under control. In other words, the meek here are those who are not retreating from life, but who engage life out of their strength, but they control their strength. What does that mean spiritually? To be meek spiritually? Let's process that a little bit. Spiritual strength. One of the ways that I look at that is stamina, and that means I retain my faith. I keep my faith even when it gets difficult, and I've been doing this for a long time. That's what stamina, in my opinion, that's spiritual stamina. I don't think you can have spiritual meekness without spiritual stamina. I think spiritual stamina means we can deal with outside negative influences. We can deal with disappointment. We can even deal with our own crises of faith. And every serious follower of Jesus is going to have a number of crises of faith where things happen and you can't explain it, and you can't rationalize it. It defies those things. Meekness of faith, spirit, means I can deal with that. We'll inherit the earth. How in the world? Well, okay. I'm not sure I've got it figured out so how do we inherit the earth? Are we talking about, which earth are we talking about? That's maybe a piece of it. I think God promises a new heaven and a new earth. Those of us who have said yes to Jesus and follow him and submit to his grace, we're going to inherit a new earth. This is not a promise that if you are spiritually meek, the world will be your oyster. I don't see that. Didn't see it in Jesus' life. Well, I got to think about that some more, and so do you, but we'll pick it up next time on SoulCare with Stevie Boy.